the Santa Cruz City County Libraries Joint Powers Authority Board. Roll call.
Tina Friend. Here. Martin Bernard.
Here.
Jamie Goldstein.
Here.
And Carlos Palacios.
Here. Are there any additional materials?
We did include an update to the Felton lease and cover page. We had submitted an old cover as part of the packet, and so we wanted to make sure the lease and the cover page matched.
Okay, so noted. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda?
I have that.
Okay, so we'll now open it up for oral communications from the public. If you have any comments, please approach the podium.
Good morning again. Just thank you for using microphones. Makes it a lot easier to hear. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Michael Lewis. I have a comment and suggestion about the agenda packet. Those of us, the members of the public, access the agenda packet as a downloadable file on the internet. It's called a PDF file, and it has all the things in it that you have in your packet. Unfortunately, it comes to us in a form that's not very usable. The pages of it are all JPEGs, they're image files, and so we can't highlight and copy anything. We can't make notes and annotate it for our own use because they're all images. If in your file you have staff reports and many other reports that originate as text documents, they're done in Word or whatever word processing program you use, you can export from those text documents directly to a PDF file that comes to us as a text document so that we can highlight, we can copy and paste pieces of it so that when we're responding to you from the staff report, then we can very easily copy and paste. Otherwise, we can't do it. We can only take a picture of it and include it, and it's very awkward and would be much more useful to us if that could be provided in a form that we can copy and paste from. I know this is a technical thing. If you could just pass on these comments to your IT folks so that they can take that into consideration in the formation of the PDF file of the staff report. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Any other comments on oral communications? Okay, thank you very much. We will now move to item 6, which is the report by the library director.
Within my delegated authority is decisions over the collection. So one of the things that I have worked with the staff on is a long discussion about whether we should boycott Macmillan, one of our major publishers, because of the way in which they're treating libraries. This would be joining a boycott of many libraries nationally. And we have chosen to do so. There is an impact to our users. But we're in a really difficult stage with publishers right now. And I know publishing is going through some really complicated changes to their industry. But I think it's really essential that publishers and libraries work together to come out with approaches to providing access to literature to our public. And so at this time, we are moving forward with the boycott of Macmillan. The second thing I just wanted you to see, and it's on page 6 of the LJPA packet, our integrated library system provides the opportunity recently to let consumers know what kind of savings that they would get by calculating the cost of purchasing the materials that they're borrowing. And so I just wanted to show that we've added this to our checkout slips, and here's an example of one. I just think it's a nice information piece for the public to understand the value of their taxpayer dollars. We have had some complaints about monetizing what is a loved service, but I think it is an interesting and enlightening thing for folks to see the value of some of what we do.
A bit like putting calories on a menu.
Kind of.
You really do.
but I would prefer to see what I see.
Okay, is that it? Thank you. Okay, that's the report by the library director. We now move to item 7, which is report by Friends of the Santa Cruz Public Libraries.
Morning, everyone. I'm starting to feel like I have a cough just from listening to all of this. So this is my last JPA report, and it's because I left a list of what the Friends have given to the libraries this past year, and you'll see that it's over $104,000 this year. That $62,000 was for different collections. $30,000 for the environmental collection at Felton, $14,000 for mystery books. And we also, this year, we did $10,000 for new book giveaways for the summer reading initiatives. We also did about we did about $8,000 in funding for summer reading programs and $4,000 for STEAM programming. I put it in terms of whether we gave to branches or system-wide. This next week or so, we're going to be sending in the first part of Monterey Peninsula Foundation Challenge, and we'll be sending in a match for $240,000. And that includes $70,000 from Dr. Mihalik for the Boulder Creek Library, an estate gift from UC Artist of $25,000 for Garfield Park, and Mark Monty has done his first pledge payment of $18,000 on the $30,000 pledge from Deluxe Foods. And I just wanted to say I've loved working here, and it was fun, exciting, and I will be coming back as a volunteer for the City Santa Cruz Libraries. So thank you.
I would just love to maybe get a round of applause.
Yes, on behalf of the board, we really do thank you for all your hard work. You did a great job this year.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for everything you've done for the community. Okay, we'll go on to report by the Library Advisory Commission.
We have not met since.
Okay, so there's no report. Thank you. Are there any comments by board members? There are not. So we'll go on to the consent calendar at this point. Any questions from the board on the consent agenda? Okay, we'll now open it up to the public for public comment on the consent agenda. If anybody has any comments. Okay. May I have a motion then to approve the consent calendar?
Move to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. We'll move to general business. The first item is elect the chair and the vice chair. The rotation schedule says that the chair will transfer to City of Capitola and the vice chair to City of Santa Cruz. Are there any comments from the public on this item? If not, do I have a motion from the board?
I will move approval of the calendar year 2020 board chair as the City of Capitola and the vice chair as the City of Santa Cruz.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries unanimously. And now transfer the chair of the mic to the chair.
Yes, again. Okay, so thank you all. That takes us to our next order of business today, which is our fiscal year 2020-2021 budget assumptions. Committee staff report, please.
Well, it's never too early to start planning for next year's budget. We just wanted to make sure that you were aware of things that we were working on and that we hope to be bringing forward as part of the next year's budget cycle. Again, our revenue forecast is pretty static based upon the MOE agreement several years back. We're hoping to make some changes in 4 areas. The first is we would like to simplify some job classifications, really to create more flexibility in using staff. We get into some interesting positions where people are half one thing and half another, and the pay differential of the two halves are wildly different. So we'd like to look at whether we could consolidate some of those job classifications. I think like everyone, we're also struggling with some of our job classifications in information technology. And so we'll come back and have conversations about that. The second area, and we'll have a bigger conversation about that today, is we had created a longer-term commitment to create a base budget for facilities operations and maintenance. And our goal was to increase that budget $50,000 a year over 8 years till we had at least $400,000 in that budget line item. Third, we'd like to have a conversation about our materials budget. We've been trying to keep consistent with an 8% of total budget, but we just want to show you some data about how we're benchmarking nationally and where we feel our collection's strong and where we feel the collection's weak. We believe with the opening of the new libraries, there will be a lot of stress on the collection. And last, if you look nationally, what you're seeing is the elimination of late fines overall. 2 years ago, we eliminated late fines with children's materials, very popular with the public. We're going to look at the consequences of eliminating late fines for adults as well. And we'll be able to show to you who's been doing it, why they've been doing it, and what experience that they've had. I would say that the elimination of late fines does not eliminate an individual's responsibility to replace an item they do not return. And that's true for children and adults. But because of these issues are coming up and require dialogue, we just wanted to put them on the table and make you aware of them.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from board members?
I have a question. So when I was reading the report, I don't have the benefit of a lot of history that my other board members have. And I was looking at item 2, the facilities operations and maintenance, and you discussed building up to that base annual budget amount of $400,000 for all the branches. And what came to mind for me is that I think it still is murky about what's the library's responsibility versus a jurisdictional responsibility. So I'm wondering how that number was arrived at as adequacy. What were the assumptions in building the $400,000 as being sufficient for all 10 branches, and kind of where that conversation's going?
Tita, that's a really, really good question, and I wish I could answer it fully. I think as we get into the lease conversation with Felton, we'll have a more full conversation about this. We had originally talked about having the JPA be fully responsible for all maintenance costs of all buildings. This is a really fundamental decision this group has to make. If that is decided, then the library's operating budget needs to have an appropriate maintenance, both capital and operating budget for the maintenance of the facilities. The $400,000 was really a $10 a square foot estimate of where we're going to end up in terms of square feet for the system as a whole. The $10 was researched as part of BOMA, Building Operations Maintenance Association's standards of what basic maintenance should be. And I would say that I think BOMA standards are light for libraries. They're created more for office buildings, but higher education tends to use them as well. The difficulty is we tend to have a lot more people in our buildings for a lot more hours of the day. And so things like carpeting and furniture wear out more quickly than in a traditional office setting. So I'm open to the discussion, and I'm open to doing analysis. This is sort of where we were last year. I'm not sure where we will be this spring.
Okay, so that was the intention of prior conversations, but that may shift as we get into the actual budgeting and we start looking at the leases more.
Yes.
Okay, I appreciate the background, thank you.
Okay, with that, are there any public comments on this item?
Hello again. I'm troubled by the late fines being removed. And I'll tell you why. We have a lot of rights. The public has a lot of rights with regard to the library. I feel we have responsibilities too. And I think it sends the wrong message to not only children, from their parents and from the library. But to adults that says, you have the right to take this book from the library, and you don't have to return it on time. And 3 weeks and a simple fine. I think it sends the wrong message. And because I feel personally that responsibilities are important as adults as well as children. The other thing that troubles me about this is that a fine would be a very small amount of money to pay. So it's not onerous on low-income people or children. It's not onerous at all. How are you going to get somebody who doesn't bring the book back and doesn't pay a fine, how are you going to get $35 from them to replace the book? If they don't have to take the responsibility to return the book to the library, take care of it and return it, then, and you're concerned about the fines being onerous, how are you going to get that money to replace that book? I wish that you would reconsider that, Susan, as somehow or other in a positive, educational, teachable moment, learnable, because that's what libraries are all about, educating. Somehow or other change the notion of fine as onerous as something that teaches us about our responsibilities. Thank you.
Just like to underscore and emphasize Susan's concern about maintenance. In my years as a museum curator, I learned one thing, is that free money often builds things with no maintenance fees accruing to support them. And here we have quite a large increase in the square footage of the library facilities, new facilities, new things that all need to be maintained. And without a solid provision for maintenance of these things, we're going to be back in the same situation we are in this building right now, where we've had deferred maintenance over the years, the building deteriorates, and we're going to have to build a new building sooner than would be necessary. So I support this concern for maintenance, and I encourage you to make sure that as we move down the road with this new facilities from the Measure S funds, that every building and every increase in facilities is supported by realistic maintenance monies.
Is there any further public comment? Seeing none, I'll close public comment, bring it back to the board for discussion. Does anyone have any comments?
Sorry, one more question. And so I appreciate that we're outlining just these are 4 major policy discussions we will be having in the coming calendar year. That's what we expect.
In the next 6 months.
In the next 6 months, okay. Thank you.
I do have a couple comments that I would just like to share as we start looking at the budget assumptions. I think the first one is related to Tina's comments and questions about the facilities operations maintenance budget. I think my suggestion, obviously there's going to be a lot of work. We're going to have to work out with the leases, who's responsible for what with the buildings, and that's going to influence this. I think my suggestion would be for us to think about this more as a reserve rather than as a budget line item every year, so that we are, if in 1 year things go good and we end up budgeting money for building maintenance and we don't spend it, that it doesn't just disappear, that it stays in this sort of building maintenance fund. So whether it's a fund or a reserve, I would leave that to you and your financial team to make a determination, but treating it kind of as a fund that we put money in every year and the expenses go up and down over time would be my recommendation. On the eliminating fines, I want to admit that when I saw this originally, I had a lot of the same concerns as a member of the public about eliminating the fines. I really do understand the logic behind with youth, that it can become a barrier to entry in the library. But I do firmly believe that there's an accountability and a responsibility that comes with using a public library. And frankly, when books aren't returned, it doesn't impact anybody sitting at the table here. It impacts the public, because it means that, I've been on one of those waiting lists, and it's like weeks, months can go by before you can get the book. And so I have that concern. I'm not saying I'm not going to support this if at the end of the day the state of the art and it's shown to me why this would make sense, but it initially raised those same kinds of concerns about accountability and impact on the public to access the material that we spend a lot of public dollars to make available to people. I guess the last sort of comment I would have is that for budget assumptions, I think one of the really key things is, my recommendation is that we have an overarching sort of budget assumption is that we find a way to work at a balanced budget level. That's the kind of overarching principle that we're coming into this is I see revenues are only growing by about a little bit under $300,000. My direction, my hope would be that we find a way that revenue picture can match the expenditure picture for next year so that we're not in a position of using reserves. So those would be my comments. Any board member have any further comments? Seeing none, do we need a motion on this, or was this just a...
Any information.
Okay, great. So with that, it'll take us to item C, which is mid-year position authorization. Susan, can we have staff report, please?
So, for the 1920 budget, the JPA approved the addition of 5 FTE. We were allowed to go forward and hire 2.5 FTE for the Felton building. I have to say that the city is a little backlogged in hiring, and it's been a little more difficult doing that in a timely way. We do have the 1.5 LA2s hired, but we're just getting to hiring the Felton librarian at this point right now. So one of the things I want to say is these things take time. The idea was that we would come back and ask you for the additional 2.5 for the Capitola Library. This board requires a unanimous decision on budget issues. I think I've demonstrated that there's enough recurring and non-recurring money, but I think there are board members that are still really uncomfortable with moving forward with the additional hires. So in order to make progress, I'm recommending that we treat this as an overhire to the point at which the Aptos branch closes. So we would do the hiring now of the additional 2.5, but then we would take those 2.5 positions away when the Aptos branch closes, which is now going to be 6 months later, so likely in 2021. And we will absorb that through vacancies.
Okay, are there any questions from board members?
I do have one. It's just to walk me through the sequence. So I know in the report we've got 95.33 FTE now, and the suggestion is, well, I guess the kind of fundamental issue is that we are adding square footage onto our library system.
At Capitola and Felton.
At Capitola and Felton, and Aptos maybe.
And Aptos.
And Aptos maybe. And a sense that there's just an appropriate ratio of square footage in the library to the staffing to support that. And if I'm, please correct me if I'm wrong, but.
And I would just say it's kind of a complicated, it's an art, not a science.
Yeah.
And it's complicated by things like hours and the size of the building and the types of programs, whether we're doing reference desk hours at a particular branch. And we tend to focus on branches that have high K-12 populations for reference hours. So it's this mixture of things that kind of give us a basic staffing level. My big concern about this is we're understaffed to begin with. I think we made it through this year pretty well, actually, because we had some branches closed. So for example, we have had to close branches during the holidays because we can't get enough staff to cover vacations and sick call-ins. And we actually kind of made it this year, but I would say I think we're about 20 to 25% understaffed on an ordinary day. And that doesn't take into account the kind of explosive growth I think you're going to see when we open Felton. We also need staff during the setup and takedowns of libraries. And we've also been asked by the community to do programs and services in the community while branches are closed. Okay, so for me, I really do believe we need the 5 FTE, but I will take it in the short run. And I think we need 3 to 6 months lead time before a branch opens to hire. So.
Thank you, so that helps. It's not just square footage equals X number of FTEs, so that's really helpful to get that context and to talk about how even though branches aren't open, there still is demand for library staff to do services, either winding down or ramping up a branch or providing services. So the proposal here is that to go ahead and start hiring the 2.5 for the Capitola, which is opening in the fall. Is that right?
Summer.
Okay. But the proposal here is to do that as an over-hire, I think, which could be fine, but then to automatically delete, once there's attrition and there's vacancy in other positions, just to not fill those.
We wait for the attrition because we don't have enough staff to do Capitola with Aptos open. So we will wait for attrition after Aptos closes.
Okay, okay.
So if you had a vacancy, if there was a vacancy after Capitol opened but before Aptos closed, presumably
would fill it. And I just have to remind people, we have a huge number of part-time and on-call.
So you have attrition.
So we have aggressive attrition. To be honest, the thing that I'm most sad about is the librarian position. Because what we're trying to do is balance librarian skill sets. So someone who's great at teens may not be great at kids. Somebody who's Spanish language outreach to Latinx communities may not be the person to be working with the homeless group downstairs. Mm-hmm. So, and we are pretty aggressively using the librarians that we have in the community after we temporarily close a branch. So Brenda from Capitola is in the community doing story times in Capitola.
Okay, so my questioning is just leading me to, are we going to be better off or worse off when we get to the point where we have attrition and we lose the other positions? I think we're being very budget conscious. I think that's probably where we are, but I am concerned about us being able to operate.
I think we won't be able to do the hours we're doing, and I don't think we'll be able to provide necessarily the librarian services like in the Aptos community at that point.
So would we expect then in the fall to be having those conversations about service level changes?
Yeah.
Because of our staffing levels?
And we may have to, what I'd probably like to do is project it out as we discuss hours for the budget.
And the 2.5 FTE, just to put a dollar number on that, that's probably
I think
175,000 or something. I'm not sure what your positions are. 350. 350. Okay, so it's about 350. Okay. And I'm sorry, one more question, Susan. Could you remind me of, we looked at this at our last meeting, and I don't have the figures in my mind, kind of our reserves and where we are financially with what we're projecting.
So
I know we'll get all this when we have our budget considerations.
$2 million in our budgeted reserve. We have over $1 million in our unexpended resources. And we have the MOE producing over $1.5 million a year above what is currently being allocated.
Okay.
So that's recurring.
But yet we have some deficit in our projections, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, we're having conversations, I think they've been positive, so I
Okay.
think we'll have something to get a difference also. So I think certainly in the context of the budget, having this discussion will be really pertinent.
And this will at least allow me to hire.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, with that, we'll go to public comment. Any public comment on this item? Seeing none, I'll close public comment and bring it back to the board for discussion.
I would move authorization for the mid-year hires for the Capitola Library opening.
There's a motion, is there a second?
I'll second that, but I want to ask, does that motion include the automatic attrition part of that? Or is this right now?
It It was as a temporary overhire as outlined in the board
As a
memo.
temporary overhire, okay. But I would ask that we revisit this, you know, when
Yeah.
and we'll be doing all this in the budget conversations,
We will.
of course, yeah. Okay.
So I guess, part of this I recognize is the fact that I was raising a lot of questions during the budget process. And I think, I'd like to focus again on kind of my core issue really is I'd like to see a multi-year chart showing the branches and how the staffing is allocated and how that changes over time as we go through the remodels and we go through branches opening. My understanding is that when Felton closes, I believe that there was around 5 staff that are devoted to Felton,
2.5.
Aptos.
Oh,
Aptos.
yes.
As Aptos closes, there's about 5, I can't remember the exact
Oh, that's
figure.
correct.
Who would then be freed up. And so I understand during this period when we have all of the new Felton and Capitol open and Aptos hasn't closed, that we have this need. But then I understand Aptos will close for a period of several years, and then presumably something will happen with Maine, hopefully before that ends. And so I just, as a board member, I would really like to see how that lays out over time. And I think that this is a reasonable solution to deal with it, because I recognize for a period of 6 months, approximately, we're going to have the new branches open and the old branches open all at the same time, but then we'll get into a period, presumably of several years, when it's not the case. So that's my one ask, is I'd really like to see, before I get in a position of making a long-term commitment to additional staffing, particularly with the budget situation that we have facing us down the road, is understanding how that plays out over time. So I just wanted to put that on the table, but I'm prepared to support this to help us move forward and have staffing necessary to get the buildings all open. So is there any further discussion? Okay, seeing none. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We have 2.5 new positions as a temporary overhire. Okay, so that takes us to our Felton lease discussion.
So-
Do we have a staff report, please?
Please use your new cover sheet.
Okay.
We're asking you to approve the attached lease between the County of Santa Cruz and the Santa Cruz Public Libraries for the Felton branch. I have to say, this is one where we've been trying to get a lot of people to talk over the holidays. It's been difficult. The county really wants to go into the opening of Felton, which has now been changed to most likely February 22nd, with a lease. And I have to say, some of the ambiguity in all of this is my own concern about long-term maintenance. So in a traditional library with a traditional board, there are a lot of models where local entities own the buildings and libraries use them. But they are very unlike the JPA. So even 2 years ago, when we were talking about who's in charge of maintenance, what we have right now is sort of a mixed model, where some of the jurisdictions do maintenance, some don't do any maintenance at all. And to be honest, the library is expected to do maintenance and has no budget for it. And we've got 50 years worth of deferred maintenance. And I think we all agree we want to move away from that. So I think the two approaches are that the library do all the maintenance on all the buildings, and there be operating budget to do so. The other is that we are a tenant in the jurisdiction's building. We do operating type maintenance, but capital maintenance would be done by the local jurisdiction. And we had been sussing out the first, and to be honest, Kira said the thing that she worries about as a manager in this organization is that we don't have the depth of maintenance staff to really take full care of the capital maintenance of 10, physical library branches. And that, is it to our comparative advantage as a library system to develop that bandwidth internally, the administrative structure, that can do sort of a much bigger scope of maintenance than we've ever done? Or should we look at purchasing services from another entity like the city or the county to do this kind of maintenance that has more depth? Now that's really an operational decision about how we get it done, not about who funds it. But I think that there's some really interesting issues that come out of that discussion, because it is costly to create sort of that infrastructure that can support a larger maintenance program. And then we started having conversations with the county about whether the county, whether we could go back to the other proposal, which is we act as a tenant, and that the city and the county and the jurisdictions provide the capital maintenance, and we just do more of the day-to-day operating maintenance. Interestingly enough, in talking to county council, that is very much the direction they started to go. And this lease actually represents a lease where the county would pay for the major capital maintenance, and the library then would do more of the day-to-day operating maintenance. And I don't think anyone's necessarily fixated on what is the right dollar amount or what is the right definition of that. But that would be a fundamental change to what we've been talking about for the last 2 years. But I'm becoming more and more convinced that that change might produce better ongoing maintenance of the facilities in the long run at a cheaper cost. So I think the theory would be the city and the county both have some maintenance infrastructure, and the city and the county are providing resources to the library, that some of those library resources would be pulled off for those capital, and then each of those entities would create maintenance pools from which, and honestly, because these are library funds, you couldn't spend them on other places in the county or the city, but it would create a pool that could be used to fund, sorry, I get coherent, too much cold medicine, capital maintenance. Nicole, did you want to add anything to that? Travis is here as well.
No, I think that you've summarized it well. I don't know, Travis, do you have anything else about the lease?
Well, I think that the lease is...
Can you?
Sure.
Thank you.
Travis, will you introduce yourself?
You bet. Travis Carey, Director of Capital Projects, County Santa Cruz. Also interim real property, Chief Real Property Agent for the county. So working on library construction and also the lease agreements at this point. So I think that the lease that we've come up with is a good model. It is actually consistent with other leases that the county has, where we have an entity in a county building, and we've structured a lease so that there is some responsibility for the tenant for daily maintenance, and then the county is responsible for larger capital work because it is a county-owned building, especially on a brand-new building. We'd be very concerned about making sure that the preventative maintenance is done, and that we have somebody, whoever that responsibility ends up being, really taking a close look at the building on a regular basis to make sure that we avoid the issues that we would have with not doing our preventative maintenance. So I think that the lease is very well structured now, as it is, based on the information that we have. I'm glad to see that there is a reserve fund that the library has for maintenance. And I would agree with Jamie's comment about having that be a reserve fund, and that would be a model that we would be promoting with other types of leases at the county, because ongoing maintenance is an issue that we want to make sure we address and that it's funded well.
And I apologize in particular to you, Martine, because we're kind of throwing this at you in a single meeting with the expectation that we sign off on a lease. To me, then what would happen is that we would re-look at the $10 a square foot, and that the county would create a capital pool out of MOE funds and not allocate that to the library. And that capital pool would also cover both Capitola and Scotts Valley. But then the city would reduce their payment to the operating funds of the library and also create a capital pool. The work, though, then would be being done by the county maintenance groups and the city maintenance groups. We would still, the library would have a maintenance line item, but it would be the more day-to-day maintenance, furniture replacement, utilities, more like a very typical lease. And part of what I like about this is I think there's a simplicity to it. It is more like a typical lease. And ultimately, the asset is owned by the jurisdiction, so they do have some incentive to maintain it.
Yeah, and I think that the intent of this lease was not to, I think this lease was meant to work obviously from the county's perspective and the library's perspective for the particular building that we have. It wasn't, if it could be used as a model, that's great, but it wasn't meant to be a model for all the other jurisdictions because everyone is going to have a little bit different way to go. But I think it's very workable and it's also able to be modified. So I wanted to make sure that was clear, is that there's a modification clause. This is kind of the first newly constructed building that we'll be having a lease on with the library. So there might be growing pains, there might be things to learn, and the lease can be modified.
And I just think, though, that there will be slight differences, but I think what we are seeking is equity across jurisdictions in a way that hasn't been achieved in the past. I think that becomes a really important principle. So there's two things I would just say to keep us moving forward. One is we may want to add the same language to this, if you want to approve it, that says let's let legal counsel work on it a little bit more. But then I think we are setting a precedent. And Martine, is a precedent that affects you. And for Tina and Jamie, it's a precedent that affects you too. You need to have some comfort with that relationship with the county. Though I know you have RDA agreements that in some ways create this relationship with the county outside of this jurisdiction. The other thing we could do is we could call a special meeting in February. The LFFA is meeting, so it wouldn't add dramatically. And I do believe a lease could be approved at a special meeting. Can't it?
Yeah, I believe so.
And so that would at least give everyone some time to think about, because this then is the decision that the jurisdictions are going to be in charge of their capital. And I agree that we can continually modify the details of that, but that's a big decision.
Make a couple comments.
Maybe we do questions first and then public comment and then comments?
All right, just
Okay, are there any questions from board members? I did have one question, is we have a 5-year term proposed in this and a pretty hard stop at the end, like 11:59 at night, and immediately terminates.
The truth of the matter is we pulled in the Fourth Amendment and kept looking at it. And this sort of ends at the end of the Fourth Amendment, whether we sign a lease or not. And so there's
The Fourth Amendment of the LFA.
at the, oh, it's
The
a
LJPA.
the LJPA.
Of this
Oh,
authority.
this body.
And so the reason it ends at that point, and we want it renewable, is the
This
JPA
body
Fourth
is-
Amendment kind of,
We're not there anymore, in theory, without
Right.
extension. Okay.
We had originally proposed a much longer term, up to equivalent of 30 years, because why not? But that, in discussions with Susan and council, it felt like it was more, at this point, the commitment could only be to the expiration of the agreement.
Okay.
So, and we would expect, of course, whatever other, if there's an extension to that or another body, then of course it would continue.
Yeah, that explains it.
Yeah.
The short timeline
Yeah.
caught my eye. Okay, is there any public comment on this?
I like what I'm hearing from Susan and what the board is considering. I live in the first district, and I also know that county council is an excellent entity in terms of working on the details of this. As a member of the public, I feel very comfortable about that. I also think that it does make sense to let the library be a library and let those who are good at capital maintenance do capital maintenance under what I think you're talking about designing. I think it makes a lot of sense. As a member of the public, I feel better about spending of monies that way. I like that. I had one question. Would that capital pool that you're talking about, would that be coming from our special taxes? Not. Okay, so it'd have to be something else. So I just want you to know that this rests easy with me, and I like what I'm hearing, and I think it's a very good best management practices idea. Thank you.
Okay, is there any further public comment? Seeing that, I'll bring it back to the board for deliberations and comments. Martin?
Yeah, I think in general, I'm not opposed to the general approach here. I think it's there's some logic here. Just a couple of observations or thoughts with respect to the funding approach. I think that's something we can discuss as part of the MOU discussions. We haven't had this, but that's something that has to go with us at this time anyway. So it doesn't preclude us from moving forward with this approach for this lease at this time. And then secondly, the other area we might have some consideration is with respect to facilities that are system-wide use facilities, that we don't want to treat those differently just because they're a different animal insofar as their use and so but again, that's not something that would preclude this from moving forward. But as far as the general approach, again, I don't necessarily have a major opposition to that.
I think the general approach is very good in that it does relieve the library from this sort of maintenance responsibility and puts it back on the city or the county, which I think overall is a good approach. I think in terms of funding, the city of Santa Cruz and the county have been in discussions regarding the MOE going forward, and I think we're in at least conceptual agreement, and we're very close to actually getting a written agreement and bringing that to our boards and to this body. That will eventually provide more of the county library fund that will become available then to the JPA, which has now been set aside at the county and has been used primarily to supplement the capital projects of the building of the projects. And it will also provide for some level of increase from the city of Santa Cruz into the MOE. So there will be an increased MOE from the county and from the city, which will go into the operating budget of the library. And that will secure the library operating budget in a good way, but it also provide funding for these maintenance issues. And then at that point, I think it would be good to do an MOU between the various, the cities and regarding the maintenance, ongoing maintenance issues. So that way it's very clear, but I think it should be part of the discussions as we get into the budget, and we hopefully have the MOE information available, and we know what resources are available. We could then do a side agreement MOU regarding the actual maintenance of the specific buildings with each of the cities and the JPA.
think I want to reiterate a couple of the comments. I think one is just that I think this is an interesting model. Director Nimitz is correct, is that the city, at least of Capitola, I know, has a contract with the county about building maintenance, and what will happen with our library when it's complete. So I'm really encouraged to hear Carlos's comments about having some sort of partnership between cities of Scotts Valley, Capitola, and the county, so that there can be active participation in the management and the maintenance decisions. That's my only, I think I just like to work on that detail as we move forward with this model. I guess one other suggestion I might have for the contract, just because I know how sometimes it can be difficult to track these funny things, is potentially we could change the term language to say that it terminates here unless the LJPA is extended, at which time this would automatically extend unless some other action was taken. Just as a suggestion, because I know personally, sometimes you have deadlines and you focus on X, and then suddenly you pull up this lease 8 years later and discover you've been operating with an expired lease for many years. So that would be a suggestion if we were going to approve it today. Obviously, the exact language would be subject to approval, I think, by legal, because I don't want to take what I just said verbatim and put it in a document. But that would be my suggestion if we were to approve it today.
Okay.
I think that's a really good suggestion.
So I would move approval of the attached lease between the County of Santa Cruz and Santa Cruz Public Libraries for the Felton Branch Library Facility, subject to final modification by the council for the Library Joint Powers Authority.
And can we just end adding a potential automatic extension?
That's fine. Yeah, yes. Adding wording regarding the extension as we have discussed of the agreement.
So extension tied to an LJPA amendment extension.
Okay.
Second?
Is there any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay. So that takes us to the last item on today's agenda, which is a meeting room policy, and it's to review a draft meeting room policy. Your staff report, please.
Eric has been working so hard.
Hi. So the library brought forward a draft policy for our meeting room LAC in their last meeting, along with guidelines from the American Library Association. And in addition to that, we also surveyed our staff who are working with groups that are reserving these spaces to find out what they may need. And the impetus largely behind this is because as we're moving forward with new buildings, we'll have community rooms that could operate independently of the library. So we wanted to review the policies governing that. One of the things that we, and I have to say, I think the LAC largely appreciated the direction that we were going. One thing that we're doing is looking at removing fees for these rooms. But what's really governing the use of the rooms is to be in line with the mission of the library around learning. So the rooms will largely be used to support that mission. And the policy follows that in a particular way when it comes to using the space after hours. Because what we are developing is a criteria for organizations that partner, what we call library partnered organizations, that are also in line with the mission. So we work with lots of outside organizations because we don't have expertise in providing free tax service, for instance, to seniors. So we partner with organizations like that. They would go through a process that they would work out a contract with us and an MOU so they could use these spaces potentially after hours. And that's for the community room, but we also have other spaces in the library. We have conference rooms and we have study rooms, and we delineate the differences between those two. And we received some feedback just recently on some of this, and there are some good suggestions. The intent for the rooms is not to be used for commercial use. And so one comment which I thought was good, has that language for the conference rooms, the community rooms, but it wasn't included for the study rooms, so we will include that for the study rooms as well.
And I just want to warn you, as we start opening new buildings, this is going to be where you get your complaints, okay? And it's, people are going to want to use these spaces. And so I think the really essential piece that we say is these rooms are mission driven. That means it's community building, community learning. And their goal is not to make a profit, and the goal of the room is not to have a party, okay? I also just need to say that there's a lot of legal requirements of a library and a lot of case studies around library use. So we have to provide a certain amount of equity as we define community learning and as we define community partners. And sometimes we may have to provide spaces to people we don't share the belief system with. But we have legal requirements to treat, it's a public space, and we have legal requirements to provide public access to it. So one of the things I think you'll find is this will become the most valuable resource in the new branches as we open, and that's going to be the stress. And I think we'll probably have to bring you some of the conflicts one by one. You'd be surprised already how much conflict, we say this isn't a commercial space, and the local real estate agent said, well, I'm teaching people how to get their first house. But the truth of the matter is they want to teach the class so that they can get leads. And, or there's a tutor that comes into the library and they get paid to tutor. Do they get preferential space, or do they get space like everybody else? The moment you offer people a door and quiet, kind of everybody wants it. So the rules become really important. It becomes really important that we work with our communities, because I can guarantee the communities are going to have a million great ideas of how to use this space, but we need to be true to our mission. We also need to secure the safety of the public and the asset, and then meet our legal requirements. So this is draft 1. And my suggestion is that you read it closely and call us if you have concerns. Jamie, I know you. You'll go through it with a fine-tooth comb, and I want you to. I think it's really important that the Library Advisory Committee help us own this. And then the truth of the matter is we are going to have to change it as we open each library, because we're going to learn. The thing that we haven't really opened the doors on is after-hours use. We do it selectively. We've had creepy problems I don't want to share with you publicly. But we need to make sure that whoever's in the building is trained to handle a variety of things that go on after hours, potentially when staff's not there. So we don't want to put these really precious assets out just willy-nilly. We want to kind of ease into some of our approaches, particularly the after-hours approaches. Develop trusted partners. At the same time, we believe that this is our future. I think if you look at how libraries are evolving, more and more the community is doing the educating of the community. And so we want to encourage movie groups and book groups and nonprofit trainings and all of those things that really create rich and free programs for our public. But this is going to be an interesting tightrope.
All right, are there any questions from the board members? Oh. I saw you first.
Okay, that's right. Okay, let's see if this works. So far it hasn't, not working. No, okay. Okay, just a question. Thanks for putting this together. I did read it carefully already. And just my one question now is, we currently have these assets. We have community rooms, we have conference room, we have study rooms. How much do these policy proposals deviate from how we're currently managing our spaces?
Somewhat.
Yeah, there are some differences. One of those relates to the fee, and it's also going forward with thinking about who will be considered a library partner, and then at the beginning stages of this could use the space outside of library hours. So we didn't really have something that governed that.
And I would just say that policy is as written is you're supposed to be making money on the meeting rooms, and the truth of the matter is we don't. But I understand why libraries have gone that direction in times of financial need. But I think the library is the last free space. And I think to achieve the kind of library we want to be, the priority needs to be learning, not making money on the room for business meetings in the community.
But some of the requirements, like for instance, the terms of use for community rooms can't be reserved for more than 4 times by one group 1 calendar year. Do we currently have that cap?
Yes.
Are those going to be consistent?
There are some changes with that as well. So, and it's in part to make sure that somebody isn't using it for commercial use, so they're coming in and they kind of have regular hours throughout the year. And it allows us as library staff to prioritize the programming that we want to have for the library as well. And I think one of the other changes includes requiring a library card. And so along with this, we're going to look at changing our software that we use currently for reserving the spaces. And that was one of the big things that came back in the surveys with staff, was trying to help them make it a more efficient process.
And let me give you an example. So a private book club wants to do their monthly meeting every month in the library. And we say to them, this isn't your private book club facility, really. But if you partner with us and if you work as a book club leader, and you can have your core group of book club, but open it up to the public, advertise it, make it part of our program, you could have your book club, but it becomes a public activity and a volunteer of the library. Do you see what I'm saying?
And so I know this is just the first introduction, but as we go forward, it would be interesting to hear what are the problems we identified, how are we solving these problems with revised policy, how are we anticipating other problems. Just so I can get a little more grounding on why we're setting these, some of the rationale behind it, that would be, I think, useful. And you all know it, I'm sure.
And I think we're hoping to this be the first reading, so that, again, we want to get it out there and have some conversations. But to finalize in March, and this might be one we update twice a year for a while.
Just a question, has the library advisory committee reviewed it?
Yep, they were the first to do
So this has already gone through the...
But we're going to do it again in January.
Okay.
I'll save mine for comments.
Okay. Is there any public comment on this item?
Well, I've submitted a list of comments because of possible helpful suggestions, because I do have quite a number of years of experience working at the Watsonville Library and see the popularity of these individual study rooms and meeting rooms. And there's a lot of aspects of it that you have to think about, even with design of the buildings as far as line of sight and staff use. I mean, are you going to be using a librarian to, open and close these rooms? Because that's a lot of librarian, time as opposed to lower paid staff or something like that. But, so there's a lot to think about, and I don't know if that policy said a limit on like what time at night, they would close, because, how many hours is reasonable? And is there going to be security there? Because when that room closes, somebody's got to look and see that damage hasn't been done. And as far as types of groups who are going to meet there, you don't want a needle exchange program giving out needles in the library, I assume. So there's a lot of things to continue to refine, and I hope my suggestions were helpful and that you got to see them, because I don't get any feedback like, yeah, we got your communication. So that would be nice if, somebody submitted something, the person knew, yes, we received it. So thanks.
And I just want to articulate that the one commercial use that is allowed and is sort of the vehicle for commercial use is the Friends of the Library. And what we do is we have an MOU with the Friends of the Library. And again, we're going to create partnership agreements. But Friends can hold a fundraiser, which I could argue is a commercial use in the library. Things like an author talk, if they want to sell books, the traditional approach that libraries have taken is 10% of their sales will go towards the Friends of the Library, and it's allowed, but it can't be required. Do you see it? So there are ways to allow some commercial uses, but it's through MOUs and partnership agreements. What we really don't want is for our users to ever feel like they have to pay for something.
Yeah, additionally, if an author wants to sell their
Please.
Oh, I'm sorry. Just to clarify, the Friends have to be at the author sale. They can only sell the book. The author can't sell it and then send the money to the Friends. The Friends have to sell the books.
And that's probably where we will get into celebratory activities as well. But my hope is to not necessarily, that gives me the capacity to approve anything. I have tried to do the whole wedding thing and special events, and the truth of the matter is, there may be some political reasons to do some, but they end up costing the library more than they get in revenue. And I think every library's director has been put in the position of make money off rooms, and I don't know anyone who's succeeded at it.
Okay, is there any further public comment? I think we've already,
Oh, can I say one more thing?
well, let's hear from,
I'll be very quick. I don't think we should have weddings at our library. There are many places in the city and the county where people can have weddings. That really bothers me. I'm glad that you're going to focus on education and learning, and we can have fun while we're learning and being educated. I'm not a stick in the mud, but let's keep our library the library, even with community meetings. My concern is there a deposit going to be required, or a fee? Didn't we have a meeting when KUSP was meeting? We paid a library for, yeah, so we do, that covers some of those costs.
I'm suggesting not charging that fee.
Oh, okay, so
Or
dropping the
if it's a
fee.
nonprofit organization.
Yeah, okay. What
with a
about a
nonprofit
deposit
purpose.
to cover damage? And my concern is much like Judy's. If you're going to close the library, if it's going to be after hours, when the people leave, will the library staff come in the morning and find soiled carpet? And then how do you prove that the room was left in the same condition that it was found, unless you have somebody checking that when they leave and the room is closed? And as far as, and then I also want to ask Eric, if we have some ideas, do we send them to you as a member of the public? Is that how you want to do this, or are you going to do a survey on the public library's website? How are you going to take comments about this?
I'd be happy to share with you my contact information.
If I have some thoughts, just go ahead and email them. Pardon me. Okay, so, and one thing about policies is they can be amended as we go. They don't have to be changed, but they can be amended. Thank you.
okay, so in general, everyone gets to speak once. Because we have a relatively small audience today, I'm okay with it as long as you can keep it short. And really, this isn't intended to be a dialogue between the public. It's comments for the board that we'll take into consideration as we consider actions, so please.
Okay, well, I think, well, it would behoove the library to provide information on other venues in the community that also could be used for meeting spaces. The library doesn't have to be, bear the burden of all this demand, so as advocates, perhaps you could, promote that idea that other facilities in the community could also be used for these things. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, with that, I will close public comment and bring it back to the board. Carlos?
Yes, I had a comment. I think this kind of issue is really, requires a lot of thought and a lot of deliberation, and ultimately it's a values decision and a community decision, and it's not an easy one because there's never a right answer. It's about choices, right? And those choices are always going to make somebody happy, somebody not. And but it's ultimately about the community and the community values. I would hope that this item and items like this could be really delegated to the Library Advisory Committee. This is, when we set up this governance board, my vision of it was that these kind of issues would be pretty much decided by the Library Advisory Committee. In fact, I'll just give you my own experience in Watsonville after dealing with these kind of issues. Over time, we have our own library and we have our own Parks and Rec buildings, and they have all these same issues. And at some point, the council just delegated it to the Library Commission and said, you decide it and you do it. And the same thing with the Parks and Rec Commission. You decided, you have hearings. They had meeting after meeting after meeting, debate after debate after debate, and then they decided it. Same thing with the Arts Commission. You know, I remember being in the council over, you know, trying to decide what art is appropriate for, and we ultimately created an Arts Commission, and we had that group. And so I feel uncomfortable, a group of administrators making political decisions, right? And this is really ultimately the ultimate political decision. It's really not about government efficiency, it's about community values. So my hope is that this discussion takes place at the Library Advisory Committee. This is what we created the Library Advisory Committee for. My hope is that eventually we would just delegate it to the Library Advisory Committee. I'm reluctant to have them go through and have a big debate, make a decision, and have it come up here, and then have that same debate and the same decision. And that's a group of administrators trying to decide, you know, which we're not used to doing, right? That's not our role. We're not, we're not typically in that kind of role. So I know that our structure right now is that we approve these policies, and I'm just worried that we get into, spend hours and hours and micromanaging, trying to micromanage it, and there's no win. There's no win for this, for a group of administrators to be deciding this. And so my hope is that the Library Advisory Committee really goes through, spends a lot of time, and makes a decision that they view as final, and that it comes here primarily as a ministerial decision. And then at some point, I would think that we ought to just delegate it to the committee and have them make these kind of decisions. I think it's a tough role for us to be in. If it got into a big fight and then people are lobbying our boards, telling us how to vote and all that kind of stuff, and I've had that happen. And so, given our governance structure, I'm hoping we would go that direction, at least to this time and in the future.
Okay, is there any other comments? I do have a couple comments, not surprising. I think the first one is that I want to make sure that this policy is as you're fleshing it out, one of our visions in Capitola for our new library is to try to really activate the space, and my Parks and Rec department is really, I've tasked them with working with the library and starting to think about, could we use this facility for some of our programming that we put on as a public agency? So that would mean, whether it's a class on, a city class on, early Capitola history education, or, how to do your taxes and things like that. And so what comes with that is we need to be able to use it more than 4 times a year. And then in addition, recreation departments do operate on a fee basis, so I really want to work on that a little bit, about the price for admission. That I understand libraries traditionally, if you have a robotics class for kids that's offered by a library, it's free. Parks and recreation programs do the exact same thing, and it's $25 or whatever it is, and it's always accepted that that's the way it is. I guess I'm sort of challenging everyone to maybe blur that line a little bit, and so that we can offer more through our Parks and Rec programs at the facilities, and still use the fee for service in some cases. So that's just one thing I wanted to put out there. I understand Director Palacios' concerns about us signing off on that. I guess on this policy, I guess I also would suggest that, in general with our jurisdictions, we would prepare a draft and we would research it and we would propose it to our board. And I don't love the idea of being the final sign off on this, but I do like the opportunity to look at it and think about whether all the specific situations that we may encounter in our jurisdiction are being addressed. And then lastly, I guess I would also act on the the concern about the building. I get nervous about just sort of turning over the keys without a deposit or anything else to really make sure that we're taking good care of our buildings, especially for after-hours type uses. So thinking about how a deposit is done, or insurance for the building or something, because I really want to protect this asset, and not as a barrier to entry, but as a just protect it for future generations. So those are my comments.
And I just want to say, Park and Rec departments are already part of our sort of key partners. But the fee basis thing is a huge discussion, and I think that's a great thing to bring to the LAC, because we have turned down incredible programs because they are fee-based. But there are a lot of reasons why. So,
Yeah,
so
I
I think that
understand.
would be something that would be great for the January conversation.
Yeah, and just to add to that and reiterate, so library partner organizations wouldn't be restricted by those
Rules.
rules of time. And some libraries will partner with Parks and Recs and contract with them and cover those costs in their programming budget to provide those services for free for the public.
That would require a programming budget, but yes.
Yeah, and that's, honestly, it's a conversation I'm having with my local friends group. Is
Or
that
benefactor, yeah.
is that a source? But these are things to think about as we draft the policy. I think there's a lot of good things to chew on here.
One, if you look at the Friends gifts from last year, that's in fact what they're doing by paying for these events and programs.
Okay, is there any further council comment? So no action is required. We'll definitely look forward to the advisory committee taking a good look at this policy.
So we have to still do my personnel.
Okay.
Yes, we're going to go to closed session.
Okay, so we'll go to closed session.
And we will come back and report out closed sessions.
Yes, we will. Okay, so with that, we are adjourning to closed session, and we will reconvene in open session to report out in closed session when the closed session is complete. So thank you all. Okay, so bringing the board back into open session, just to report out on closed session, the board met in closed session and listed the item, considered the item listed on the closed session agenda. The board took no reportable action. That brings us to item F on the agenda, which is to consider a library director contract. This is an amendment to the library director's contract to incorporate the COLAs that were previously approved in the city of Santa Cruz, which I believe is a 3% increase in October of 2019, a 4% increase in October of 2020, and then a 3% increase in October of 2021. Is there any further staff report? Seeing none, bring it back to the board for questions or action.
No questions.
All right.
Move to approve.
Second.
All right, there's a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Thank you very much. That takes us to the end of our meeting today. We are adjourned.